And that's great. Hi, Angel. We're here, and this is live from the Heartland, the Christmas Eve edition, where we find whoever is available to talk to us without interrupting some kind of frenzied shopping thing. And I'm really, it's a pleasure to have a young candidate, which we need more of out there. A young
tall guy too,
and a tall guy. Yeah,
makes me sit up straight.
That's good. Will Guzzardi is running for Illinois State Rep in the 39th District on Chicago's Northwest Side. He is challenging Tony Berrios in the Democratic primary on March 20th. This is the latest in a series of candidates that we're having on our show. We'll have more in January and February as usual to up the participation of you voters out there in what sometimes gets passed off as somebody else's job, voting in primaries. Will, welcome to Live from the Heartland.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Is this your first foray into electoral politics?
It is, yes. This is my first run for office.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah. Now, I think in this same race, there was a pretty close contest a couple of years ago, right?
That's right. So there hasn't been a Democratic primary challenge for my opponent since 2004. A man named Pedro de Jesus ran then. But in the last two election cycles, there's been a Green Party candidate by the name of Jeremy Carpin.
Right, Jeremy Carpin.
That's right, yeah. And in the last cycle in 2010, he put up a really admirable showing. He had an incredible grassroots movement in the neighborhood, and it was a very exciting race.
It was for all the folks who are, basically always arrive at the conclusion that there should be a third party, given that sometimes the two regular parties look a little too regular and like each other. Speaking of that, your opponent is the daughter of a longtime regular Democratic machine guy, Mr.
Joe Berrios.
Joe Berrios,
right.
yeah.
He's actually the head of the Democratic Party in town.
That's right, he is. That's your Democratic Party, Michael.
Well, I march around to different leaders at different times, but I did make a choice to try to work within the progressive Democrats up here in the 49th Ward.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important role to play given the reality of the Democratic domination of the city's politics. So we'll see what kind of openings that brings us.
I think so too, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important for us to remind the Democratic Party of the values that it's supposed to be upholding, that it's supposed to be the party that works for working people, that works for our families, that works to improve the conditions in our neighborhoods. And I think too often the party sort of strays from that. And that's why I think these primary races are so important, because it gives us an opportunity to revitalize the progressive values of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think, just off the top of my head, it was Bill Clinton who kind of moved it to the center. More than some other people. And while he's certainly done some good things, and the Democrats do some good things, they do often mirror the Republicans in many ways. And I grew up in a time when, I think of the Democratic Party as the people who fought for civil rights, the people who fought for more labor rights, took a stand on a lot of things.
Absolutely.
And I think that until the structure of electoral politics has changed, we need to work within that framework in some way.
Let's learn something about Will Guzzardi.
Let me say first that Will is another guy who contacted me, and we have friends in common, and you actually know them too, Katy. It's,
goody!
People
Can I
on
play?
The West Coast. And how do we actually link up? How are we connected here?
So a friend of mine from college, when I first decided that I was going to run for office, I sent out an email to everybody who I ever met saying, hey, I'm doing this exciting thing, and if you know anybody who I should be in touch with, please put us in contact. And my friend Jessica wrote me back and said, well, I know these incredible people from Carmel Highlands in the West Coast, and they're running this great place called the Heartland Cafe. And of course, I knew all about the Heartland, and I'd been here many times. So I emailed you right away, and it was the start of a beautiful friendship.
And we played a bunch of tag, and then you showed up here the other day to meet with some people, and there you were sitting right there, and I got introduced to you by these other friends of ours. And here you are on the radio. And thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my question, which is, let's learn about you, Will Guzzardi.
Yeah.
What brought you to run? Meaning, what were you doing before, and what is it you'd like to see happen if you win?
Absolutely. Well, before this, I was a reporter. I was a journalist working for the Huffington Post here in Chicago. And the Huffington Post has a local page. There were 2 of us when I got hired, eventually 3 of us working on staff. So we covered all manner of issues, everything Chicago, city politics, schools policy, local news, crime, sports, everything. And at first, when I started working there, I was sort of immersed. I was writing and reading and analyzing, 50 hours a week, local news all the time.
Fun.
And it was great. It was incredible. And after a little while, I realized that I needed to sort of pick my beat, the areas that I really wanted to focus
Because you couldn't cover the universe?
on. Because try though I did, I could not cover the whole universe. So one of the areas that I ended up focusing my coverage on was community organizations, neighborhood groups, particularly in my neighborhood of Logan Square,
Right.
And also all around the city, that were working to make the city a better place to live, and that sort of didn't have the exposure they deserved. So I wanted to use the platform of Huffington Post to give them, shine a little light on the great work that they were doing. And, eventually, after I wrote a number of these stories, they all started sounding the same, where all of the neighborhood leaders who I was talking to, the leaders of these organizations, were saying, hey, we're struggling out here. We're trying to help the most vulnerable people in our community, and every year we get budget cut after budget cut after budget cut from the state level. We have to cut programs, we have to cut staff, and I don't know how much longer we can keep doing the work we're doing. And it was really after hearing that story enough times that I realized that something needed to be done, that these neighborhood groups needed an advocate at the state level who was going to fight for them. And I think that the families in our community feel the exact same way, that we're struggling, times are difficult, and that state government is increasingly passing the burden on to us.
Right.
That the corruption and the pay-to-play politics leads to our politicians lining their own pockets, and then the burden gets passed on to our families. And we feel as if we need an advocate down there in Springfield who's going to stand up for us.
Have you visited Springfield?
I have. Yeah, I've been there a few times.
Did you meet anybody you liked? As my grandmother would say after we came home from a night out, did you meet anybody you liked better than yourself?
Well, I met a few wonderful people down in Springfield. I think that there are a handful of great state reps down there, state legislators who are doing really great work for their communities. And one of the things you asked also, what am I hoping to accomplish when I get down there? And there are a lot of policy issues that I hope we can get into. But one of the really important parts about this race for me is joining a growing progressive movement in this city and across the state. That there's a really exciting moment right now in politics, particularly here in Chicago, where a number of real progressives are being elected and coming into office and standing up for progressive values. And I think
Give a couple of examples of real progressives being elected.
Sure. I think here in the city, on the city council, there have been a few great progressives who've won in the last couple of cycles. I mean, Alderman Wagasback has been a great progressive. Alderman Arena, Alderman Pawar, who were elected recently, are independent leaders on the council. You guys have had a progressive alderman up here for quite some time.
Yes, Joe Moore, and following in the footsteps of David Orr, who was the first independent Democrat elected in 49th Ward.
Exactly, yeah. And
we did have John Arena on this show, and we did have Amaya Pawar on the show as well. We're excited about those elections.
It's and around the city, this change is coming, and I think we have an opportunity. What you're seeing in the council now is that progressives are sort of reaching a critical mass where they can actually influence legislation here and there. Unfortunately, it's not. We're not there yet, you know.
Right.
The city council has a long way to go, but there's great leaders there, and there are great leaders in Springfield as well. And so I look forward to going down there, joining with the great leaders who are already there, working together with the newly elected progressives, and forming a real coalition who can actually influence policy and push things toward the progressive side.
You know, of course, the state is broke, right?
So I keep hearing. Although somehow we found $300 million for Sears and CME.
Yeah.
That was a surprise from a broke state.
A surprise. That's not the word I would use, but okay, we're on the radio. Yeah, so what would be the policy, maybe two policy favorites of yours to tackle or to head into once you were elected?
Well, I think when you talk about the state being broke, I think that the way that we're going to address the budget issues we have in the state, we simply can't solve this problem through more cuts. I think the cuts have already come too deep. And this is what I was talking about when I was working for the Huffington Post. I think we've seen that the cuts are really affecting our neighborhoods. They're affecting our schools. They're affecting our communities. They're affecting public safety. So we just can't keep cutting. We can't think that that's going to solve the problem. I think that the answer has to be a more fair system of taxation, where the very richest people in our city and our state, the very biggest corporations in our city and our state, are paying their fair share into the system. So right now we have a regressive income tax in this state. Well, it's a flat income tax, but the tax structure overall is very regressive, so that the bottom 20% of wage earners are paying way more in their income in taxes to the state than the top 1%. They're paying 3 times more than the top 1%, which is baffling. We have one of the most regressive tax structures in the country. And if we're looking at how we're going to get out of this budget crisis, it has to start with everyone paying their fair share into the system.
It's not really a very popular notion these days with the 1%.
With the 1%, it's not particularly popular, but I think with the rest of us, it's a notion that's really gathering some steam.
Absolutely. And the Occupy movement has to be given credit for bringing that conversation to a succinct place where all we have to say is 99 or 1% these days, and everyone knows what you're talking about. And that is an incredible development of shared understanding on the body politic, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, I really understand the frustration that the Occupy movement is expressing. And I think that, so every day on the campaign, I go out and knock on doors. I'm out there for 4 or 5 hours every day. In fact, as soon as I finish up here, I'm going and knocking on some doors this morning. So
on Christmas Eve.
On Christmas Eve, we're going to knock off, we're going to stop knocking at around 3 or 4 to give folks their Christmas Eve proper.
For about 48 hours.
Exactly. Monday morning, we'll be back at it.
Oh, my gosh.
So one of the things that I've found is that I think people in our communities have the same frustration that you see in the Occupy movement, that people understand that the corruption in politics and the corporate interests that are affecting our politics have a direct impact on why government isn't working for us.
Yes.
And that we need elected leaders who are going to be accountable to our families, to our communities, and not to the corruption and the special interests if we want to see real meaningful change.
It's difficult. Go ahead, Michael. You wanted to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, you are listening to WLUW 887 Chicago Sound Alliance, and you're listening to Live from the Heartland show, hosted by Katy Hogan and Michael James, and we're here every Saturday morning, 9 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we go till 10 o'clock. And you can always catch earlier editions if you go to theheartlandcafe.com and hit the Heartland Media Project, or go to youtube.com/heartlandmedia. And I was going to ask Will a couple other questions, but I can...
Well, on those lines, I've always done a lot of electoral politics. And I knocked on a lot of doors, and for other candidates. My problem comes in facing the voters, and they are the majority, who say they're all crooks, they're all corrupt.
Sure.
Because one, there is truth, and it's hard to say, no, I know about 2 or 3 of them who are really very nice people, and they don't cheat, and they're not stealing from us, etc.
Right.
And they're like glaze over in the eyeballs and go, yeah, 2 or 3 does not a world to make.
Sure.
But how do we get past people's disassociation from their own governing process? The idea about America was initially it's ours, babe.
Right,
We
right.
get to do what we want to do here. And most people have not felt that for a long, long time. And we can feel it on the local level, like we do here in the 49th Ward a lot. We have contact, and most people, the most local of your reps is who you know.
Right. Exactly.
Although with state rep and state senators, do you find it an uphill battle to let people know, what the office is and what it does?
Sure. Well, let me. There's
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I just pulled a Michael James on you.
I'm going to go in sort of reverse chronological. I think
I like it like that. Throw a lot of stuff out there and let them just.
I know you do.
I'll take what I like of it. So I think there is a real void. You're absolutely right. People know their federal elected officials. People know who the president is. They know maybe who their senators are, and they also have direct contact with
They're aldermen. Right.
But the state level, I think many of our state representatives, and especially in my community, we feel that there's an absence of interaction with our state level representatives.
Right.
And that's something that's really important because the state has a lot of resources it can bring to bear on our communities.
Bingo.
And has a lot of impact on our everyday lives. I mean,
Yeah.
all across the board, education, public safety, economic growth. And so for people not to know about those resources is a real shame.
Not only a real shame, it's like giving up power.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And I think that, when I talk to people, they are, so you're right about the cynicism. Absolutely, that people are cynical, and rightly so to a certain extent. But I don't think that anyone really wants to be a cynic.
I'm with you on that, my
I
man.
think that people want to be engaged. I think
Yep.
people want to trust the process. They want to get involved in the process.
They wanted to deserve their hard work.
Absolutely. And so when we show up at their doorstep and we say, hey, we're working to bring about a new type of leadership in this community that's going to fight for our families, it's going to put your concerns first, that's not going to be accountable to the machine, it's not going to be accountable to big money, it's going to be accountable to you. People get really excited about that. And, when we hear people say, oh, well, they're all crooks, and yeah, plenty of people say that, my response to those folks is this.
Well, then let's kick them out.
Well, and let's elect someone who is truly elected by us, who's not elected by the big money interests, who's not elected by the regular Democratic organization, who's elected by a grassroots movement in our neighborhoods. Because then when push comes to shove, who am I going to be accountable to?
Right.
Only the folks who got me elected. Only you guys, only the families in our community. And people really do appreciate hearing that.
Will Guzzardi, first off, where do you come from?
I come from North Carolina. I was born in New York City, but raised in North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
And when did you come to Chicago?
I moved here after I graduated from college.
Where was college?
College was at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island.
Fine Ivy League school.
Indeed, a fine school.
I always
indeed.
root for Yale now that I have a friend there.
Oh, there you go.
Anyhow, I did go to the Yale Brown games as a kid, and I've been to Brown. It's a nice school. I'm sure you got a great education. Then you came to Chicago to work for Huffington Post?
That's right, yeah.
So how old a guy are you? You're young.
I am young. I'm 24 years old.
That's wonderful. You can't even talk about the good old days.
Well, yeah, the good old days are a little more recent
That's
for me.
why the good old days are only about 10 years ago for him.
And so you decided you were working for Huffington Post. I got one question about Huffington Post. Huffington Post came on the scene. They had this woman, Arianna Huffington, who somehow used to be connected to a conservative Republican guy.
Yes,
and
by
then
marriage, as a matter
And
of
then
fact.
she ended up taking whatever money she got from that, and she became kind of a progressive publisher. And then they sold it to AOL.
That's right.
And what's your just quick take on that? Because I do still use AOL, and I do like seeing the Huffington Post popping up there for me. And do you think it compromised the Huffington Post, or it's been an addition?
Oh, well, in my experience, not at all. I mean, I was working at the Chicago page when we got bought by AOL, which for me meant that instead of working from home, I was working from AOL's offices downtown, so that was an upgrade. But
Why, where do you live?
oh no, I live in a beautiful home that unfortunately does not have a separate workspace for me. No, but in terms of our editorial freedom wasn't affected at all by Ariana retained a lot of editorial control over the page, and locally we retained all the control that we always had. So
So you don't think the content has skewed in favor of, oh, look how low cut this starlet's outfit is, which AOL front page when it pops up for me is always got at least one of those.
Yeah, well-
or see this dog save another dog.
Right. Well, HuffPost always had entertainment and sports and all the other things, but I think what people really love about it is the
politics.
is the great political reporting
Yeah.
that they do, and there's really tremendous original reporting.
Okay, let's
done.
talk about the race now.
Yes, please.
All right, so you're in a race. Are there just two candidates in the race?
There are two candidates, myself and the incumbent.
And the incumbent is the daughter of a powerful Democratic politician, so they probably have a lot of resources.
Did they try and get you off the ballot?
Interestingly enough, they did not file an objection to our petitions because we circulated them door to door. We collected way more than we needed. I had a tremendous volunteer organization out there with me, and our petitions were rock solid. So they didn't do the usual machine trick of
So the
filing objections.
39th district covers what part of the city, and what wards does it encompass?
There are three major neighborhoods in the 39th: Logan Square, Belmont Cragin, and Portage Park. And there are bits and pieces of a couple of other community areas as well. In terms of wards, we have 7. It's primarily the 31st, the 35th, and the 38th. We also have bits and pieces of 1, 26, 30, and 45, John Arena's ward.
And what would be the most progressive neighborhood would probably be Logan Square?
Well, it's interesting. I think that people respond to progressive politics in different ways across the district, but it's the core values that progressives are fighting for are things that people everywhere in the district really appreciate and like to hear. I mean,
fighting should want it.
Exactly, fighting for improved public schools for all our kids, fighting for communities that are strong and working together to keep our streets safe, fighting for an economic development that works for every family in our community, not just for the 1%. These are things that people like to hear everywhere.
Have you gotten any support from any elected Democratic officials, any aldermen or any other folks?
Well, we were endorsed about a month or so ago by Alderman Wagasback, who I mentioned earlier, and that was a really meaningful endorsement for us.
Yeah, he's a good player.
Exactly, and I think he's such an icon of progressivism in this city that it really speaks to the progressive movement that we're building around this campaign. So we were very proud to have his endorsement.
Now you have, you probably will have a formidable old-time regular Democratic Party foot soldier opposition. You talk about your own progressive network and organization. What do you got? Who's involved? How many people? How do you see it stacking up?
Well,
He's not going to say that over the microphone here.
He's going to say something.
I'd be glad to. We've got a really tremendous organization, actually. We've got a network of going on 100 volunteers who have come into office and knocked on doors for us. On Election Day, we're going to have hundreds of volunteers out there hitting the streets for us. And there are a couple of progressive organizations around the city have endorsed us as well. The Northside DFA adopted us. The Progressive Democrats of America have endorsed us. So those guys are sending volunteers to come work with us as well. We have a very formidable ground game that we're knocking doors every day right now, and that's actually an important point. That's how we're going to win this election. My opponent, you're right, has a lot of resources at her disposal. The Democratic Party has the County Democratic Party, which is chaired by her father, has a lot of resources at its disposal. But the
put it mildly. Jeez.
The way that we're going to win this election is one door at a time, one voter at a time, one conversation at a time, talking to people, reaching out to neighbors, and building the movement in a grassroots way. And already we've seen incredible support for the campaign so far.
There's not going to be a groundswell of people coming out in this election, probably. So your turnout will be crucial.
Absolutely.
What was the turnout? Has been the turnout traditionally in your district?
Well, it's hard to nail down a precedent for it because this primary is sort of unique in that there aren't any up-the-ticket races. There's no president, no governor, no senator on the Democratic side. But the thing about turnout, I think it plays to our advantage because the people who are going to come out to vote in this race are going to be people who
you've motivated
in this race in particular.
That's right.
And I think that we're going to have the opportunity to get a lot of people really excited about my candidacy, and it's going to be a unique advantage for us.
Do you have any polling numbers?
We do. We took a poll early on in the race, sort of a baseline poll to take the pulse of the race, and the fact of the matter is, it just verified what we've already seen going door to door, which is that people in the district are frustrated with government. They're not pleased with the incumbent. They're looking for something new, and that when we tell people a little bit about the campaign, they get really excited about it and come to our camp in strong numbers. So we're feeling as if we're in a very strong position to win this thing in March.
Last year at this time, I was about to sign on to a campaign that was supporting Miguel DeVito for mayor, and it had a lot of energy, and it was actually pretty much fun to work with all these new, younger activists. And he lives in Belmont Cragin. Have you sought out some support there?
I've spoken with Miguel at a couple of events, and he's, the thing about him is he is such a stalwart progressive. He's one of those people who, in the state legislature, he was a tremendous progressive.
He was.
And in the race for mayor, he really held on to some strong progressive values.
Unfortunately, the progressive voters did not show up. Or they voted for a guy who is now mayor.
Well,
I know, there's nothing to say there,
right?
is there?
The thing to say is we have to continue organizing. We have to make sure that as a progressive movement, we are organized, that we are active, and that we are ready to put boots on the ground and win elections, because that's the only way that we're going to see real meaningful changes, by getting more progressives elected in office.
Did you just use boots on the ground for a political purpose?
Yeah, was that bad?
No, it's traditionally, it's become the euphemism for war, but anyway, you are probably in a battle in any case. I'm sorry, I just jumped because
what happened, Katie? You got these, something clicked in your ear.
My earphones just went up about 10 notches, sort of like when I turned on the PA.
This is community radio, and we have all kind of little things happening all the time.
But it's really wonderful to be here today, because this is a community radio and because it's a community institution. It's so great to get to speak with you guys and to reach out to your listeners. And there's such a sense that we're building a community movement here. So it's great to be able to communicate with people.
Well, Will Guzzardi, it's great meeting you in person. It's great having you on the show.
Where do people look to get more information about how to help you on your campaign?
Well, my website is the best place to go. It's www.willguzzardi.com. That's WILLGUZZARDI.com. You can find out more about me there. You can sign up to come out and knock on some doors and volunteer with us, or make a contribution to help power this movement. Whatever you can do would be tremendously appreciated.
Well, we want to thank you for coming on. And what were your nicknames as a kid?
I actually, as a kid, insisted on being called William. I refused to be called Will.
Guzz?
I got Guzz and Guzzo were sort of high school nicknames.
Okay, my new buddy Guzzo and Guzz. Okay, Will Guzzardi, he's running for the Illinois State Representative in the 39th District on the Northwest side. We're glad he came on the show. You're listening to Live from the Heartland show with Katy Hogan and Michael James. We got a minute, so we're going to just tell you a couple of things. On New Year's Eve, we are going to have a wonderful celebration here at the corner of Glenwood and Lunt, and we do have a 5K race. If you show up before 8 o'clock p.m., you can run for free down at the lake. We want to tell you next Saturday we're going to have Fred Anzavino, the wonderful director of Theo Ubuque, and they're going to do Pump Boys and Dinettes. And he'll be on the show with some singers.
Yeah.
And Katie, we got 45 seconds here, so what's the deal?
We want to thank Paul and Mary. Paul Wozniak.
That's Wozniak.
And Mary Wozniak, who are both manning,
tech wizards,
staffing the tech today, as well as Angel Herrera downtown. We want to thank Lisa, Laura, and Eli, and wish all of our crew and the crew at WLUW a happy holiday. And yeah, we miss Dan.
Dan, come around.
Kugler. Come on around. We will be back with you, as Michael just said, next Saturday morning, as we are every Saturday morning at Live from the Heartland.
And we encourage you to do good in the world, because the world needs all that you good. All power to the people. Over and out.